Hi everyone, this is the analytical video for the Blot soup video. In the previous one, we went over this super high level, super well played match between Grandmasters Hideaki Ueda and Michi. And today it's time for a little bit deeper examination of some key positions, some interesting positions in this match. You might see me change background and a shirt at some point during this video because this is the last day of my visit to Monaco and Beausoleil after the World Championships. It was quite an inspiring event, so let's dive straight into it. Our first position will be taken from the first game. Let's look here at move 15. Move 15, that's a 6-1. Okay, this was quite an important decision. And it's quite instructive because this is a situation when we are quite desperate. We are, of course, at 0-0, holding a 2 cube, and we are kind of desperate to come back into the game. Obviously, if we look back, we were playing a holding game for a while, and our entire strategy was based on keeping this checker that you see on the 23rd point, keeping it back. Later, we see a second checker being hit. It enters. The second checker escapes, and we stay with a checker on the 24. And at some point, this is always a challenge. When do we need to switch gears? When do we need to prioritize saving the gammon over trying to win the game? And if we look at this position, we get the percentages on the left side. And the plays that don't move the checker from the back obviously win more. You have more chances and more time to catch plots. So your winning percentages go up from about 3.5% to double digits. You get to win 12% or 11% or 13%. Really depends on how you optimize your auto checker, but while staying back. However, you also get gammoned quite a lot. And the gammon rate will be in the 30s simply because if you are hit and finally closed out, you have many, many checkers to bring home, bring around, and this will slow down your return. And at some point, simply the risk is not worth the reward, and it's important to recognize the moment when it happens. Here, of course, white has a 4-point board. It has a variety of spares. White doesn't necessarily like to hit loose here in many cases because the black position is already quite formidable, and white is going to run into a losing risk of his own. Normally, you don't want to risk too many losses in your pursuit of the gammon because obviously winning a gammon is half as good as losing the game is painful. This is something that you learn quite early on within mastering the basics. So yes, leaving the 24 here is really, really important. I've seen enough players making this mistake of staying back too long. Let's go to the second position that comes from the second game. Fourth move by black, double twos entering. Now, why did I include this move in the video? I'm trying to remember. It's not really simple. I mean, the move looks completely elementary. I mean, what else is there to do with double twos? This makes absolutely no sense. The turn of the equities. That's what it was about. All right. The remarkable thing about this position, of course, is not the play, which is really elementary. You need to enter two checkers from the bar, and there is nothing better than to unstack the heavy 6-point and make a very important board point. But what is really striking here is that this position is advantageous for black because come to think about it, and if you examine the game from the beginning, the game belonged to white really from move one. White gets the opening roll. White makes a useful board point. Black has to open, of course, to split the back checker and start running, but he suffers a double hit. One of the checkers stays on the bar. White makes a third board point. Everything seems successful. Black dances, and white actually puts a second checker on the bar, and suddenly you have a modest entry on the twos. You don't hit anything. You make a board point, and this is basically the first real move that black is happy playing in this game. But suddenly he has the advantage after all of this hard work conducted by white. And this is interesting, right? It's an interesting reflection about how the game of backgammon goes and how it is so easy to have the advantage transition from side to side and also to have to change your mindset during the game and understand as why that you're suddenly not the leader. And also, of course, even earlier, understand as the attacker that this type of an attack in which you, especially that you commit for a deep point, the ace point early on, is a very risky. It's a very risky proposition. On one hand, there will be the games that you are going to double and win a doubled gammon. Here, for example, after this 6-5, this is already a critical position for black. If black doesn't roll well here, he's getting a cube. And in many cases, the cube will be takeable and he will be gammoned for 4 points. However, there is the flip side. If you manage to defend successfully, we see that the white position is already overextended. We have we have a very deep point, the ace point. We have checkers that are not super useful, the one on the 22. There is too much already commitment. The position has advanced too much a little bit. We are lacking flexibility. We don't have a point on the outfield except for the midpoint. Our checkers are already a little bit too deep. This can cost us later because black is only getting started. Black has 15 active checkers. All of them are in play, and they are ready to block. They are ready to attack. And exactly because black is behind in the race, he has plenty of available checkers to scatter around, to play around, to trap white, to send white backwards. And it's quite easy to see how white can suffer later from inflexibility due to the barred checkers. He simply doesn't have enough to play with. This is the problem. And it can become an issue really, really quickly. It's important to realize at which point the advantage shifts. Many times we get missed opportunities to cube positions of this type for black, and wrong and optimistic takes, or takes to four actually for white, who still thinks that he has a chance, who is hypnotized by the strength of his board. In many of these positions, white is going to have a 4-point board, a 5-point board, but these are dead checkers, stuck checkers, and it's quite difficult to bring the other checkers around. Let's, for example, examine one such typical position in the note. Here we see, for example, a very extreme case of this situation. White does have a strong board, of course, 5 points, but it's far from easy to bring these 5 checkers back. Especially we note the spare on on black's 3-point that is completely primed and it's hard for it to move, and the checkers on the 7 that are pretty stuck. And this position already can be doubled by black, can be redoubled to 4. We can see here the analysis. And let's go back to our UBC match. We just spoke about how the advantage shifted hands and is now in the hands of black, and nothing demonstrates it better than the next roll, admittedly quite an unlucky roll, a 5-3, and we begin to feel here the effects of the lack of flexibility on white side. We mentioned that white doesn't have any points on his outfield, and obviously white permitted himself to play quite loose, which he should when he's conducting an attack against a black position that is completely undeveloped. Just a move ago, we had an undeveloped black position with many awkward stacks on the 13, the 8, and the 6. Basically, the fourth position, the front position hardly moved. There was only one move from the 13 to the 8, so you could play quite freely. But then suddenly, after double twos is an amazing entering role. Think about it. When you are on the bar, most of your doubles are quite bad because they dance, right? So only 3 doubles are actually good, the 2s, the 3s, and the 5s. And in many of these positions, especially in the opening, they tend to be quite smashing and actually completely alter the course of the game. So now we see a demonstration of the weaknesses in the white position. White is scrambling to close the point, to complete the point on his side of the board with the 3, but then the 5 is super awkward. There is really no other way to play than 13-8, leaving 2 blots within direct range of the black anchor. The saving grace, you can say, of white's position, like I said in the previous video, is that black is not quite ready yet to hit with most of his rolls. I mean, he would be hitting with double 5s, with double 6s, even with 6-4, maybe with 5-4, but hitting 5-4, maybe 5-3, I don't know, it's getting already riskier. Each successive roll that I mentioned is riskier simply because, first of all, you're losing the anchor, but secondly, white has the much stronger board. So this is the saving grace. It's not so easy or simple. Of course, a 5-1 also hits very, very calmly and easily. So yes, of course, the hits are quite risky, most of them, but we also noticed that white is playing with his front position. His back checkers are still stuck, cannot move with the 3, cannot move with the 5. So we are still approaching a moment like in the example when white has the better board, the much better board, but his checkers are stuck in the back. We are not quite there yet, but we are approaching it. We can see this reflected in the evaluation. We need to get used to this way of thinking. You can have the advantage in the race, the better board, the seemingly stronger threat, and still be well behind because of the specter of getting stuck with several checkers behind when most of your checkers are already filling up your board and are completely inflexible. Let's go to the next one. Here in this position, we see black playing as safe as he reasonably can. Obviously, he could have played simply 13-6, which is completely safe. Black recognizes the need to develop his position, so he thinks, okay, let's take a minimal risk, just bring one checker down to the 10. It can only be hit with a 6-3 or a 5-4, that's only 4 shots. Double threes don't work, they are blocked. So that's a reasonable level of risk. But look what the computer already recommends. It recommends actually leaving a much larger number of shots, the 2-6, the double fours. That's another 3 shots that we didn't have before. Notice that 3-5 is blocked. That's quite meaningful. Double twos also hit, so it's 4 extra shots. We go from 4 to 8 shots. But what do we get in return? We get in return quite an uncomfortable situation for white because we are threatening to create a third board point or make the bar point and further block the exit of this inconvenient anchor on the 24. Normally, you don't want to have both your 24 point and your ace point made because this means that your position is beginning to stretch quite thin. You only have 15 seconds to play with. You cannot afford to have 4 of them parked on the very extremity of the board. So this is the delicacy of this position here, that because of the white vulnerability, and even though he has a 4 point board, we permit ourselves to be hit 8 times because we know that we have many entering numbers that can hit back. We have an anchor. So we are still in a situation where we can play relatively open because the threat is longer than because the threat is greater than the danger. The threat of making further board points can lead to a cube, while these 8 shots, 8 numbers that hit don't hurt so much for the moment, simply because we have an anchor to enter on. And the 5 is open. The 4 point board is far from the best possible 4 point board. Let's say I take this position and compare it to something a bit different, if we will. That's not the right one. Let's see what the computer says if we actually give white the best possible 4 point board. Obviously, black will be obliged to dance 3 times if he ever gets hit. So that already kind of makes the play of 4-3 less appealing. But let's see what the computer says now. Now, it's quite interesting that even if we give white the best possible 4 board, it is still the best move to play both checkers from the 13 because in this position, the reasoning is a bit different. In these positions already, we are a clear underdog as white is threatening to completely prime us on his next move, and we roll the number that doesn't allow us to hit white. So the least we can do is to try to create a play of our own, but we're already very, very clearly behind. We are very clear underdogs. Look at the difference that the placement of just 1 point brings. We put this point back to the 24, and suddenly we are still ahead. We are still leading. We have 5 points of the opponent open and 2 of his checkers completely out of play. And back to the game. So as the game progressed, we see that white managed to escape one of his checkers, and now he's actually threatening to escape with the other one and win. So as we say often, desperate times call for desperate measures. Just making a 4th board point doesn't completely cut it. It looks a little bit more solid, but it kind of misses the point. There is a saying that says 1 attack, 2 prime. You try to prime 2 checkers, and if one of them escapes, you try to attack, even though it can be quite costly. But hitting here with the recommended play, obviously it looks very risky. It looks very dangerous because we see that part of the play is actually abandoning the anchor. We could hit without doing this, but the computer does recommend abandoning the anchor and trying to start escaping from behind this kind of a wall. I cannot quite call it a prime because of the gap, but yes, we do see a wall, even with some kind of a sentinel standing here on the 7, ready to hit. So we need to do something because the problem is that if we don't do it, and if we simply quietly make a board point, we can already see white cubing after several rolls. For example, anything that really cleanly escapes with the 6 or the 6-1, the 4-3 that hit the blot on the 8. We see that this move leaves the blot. This blot can be hit. We see cubes coming. And this hitting play, most likely it's not going to allow for a cube. We get hit only with 11 numbers. We still have good chances to anchor either on the 23 or on the 20, and it's a risk that probably we have to take. But the plays are quite close. It's not quite easy to see a hit here. It looks quite scary to hit and abandon an anchor against such a strong board. The key to see this kind of a move is really some kind of a desperation. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's about choosing which desperation you like better, the desperation of white escaping and cubing, or the desperation of maybe getting steamrolled if white rolls an ace and we fail to enter. That can be quite risky. We see that the gammon rate that we suffer is considerably higher. And if we look at the cubeless equities, then if we didn't face a cube with the other play, our move would actually be the best. I mean, our Itzhak's move would actually be the best if we didn't have to consider being cubed. Actually, if we already own the cube, surprisingly, the hitting play is still best. because now the computer is thinking about our own possibilities of redoubling, and apparently this move carries some promise if it works. But well, I'm going to simply state the obvious here. The move that was played by Hideaki would fit a score in which we are never looking to redouble. For example, when we are ahead in the match and we are already holding a 2 cube, here we would like to play as safe as possible. And we already hold the cube, so we are not afraid of being cubed in case white escapes. We simply want to reduce our gammon exposure. Not so when, like in the actual match, we're trailing 2-0 and it's all about catching up. And probably this is the key. All right, let's go to the next position. And we see here the first double and take of the match. And we see the equities. We see that this is almost a correct double, but not quite. Let's say a few words about this. What we see here is a typical holding game situation where black is standing on the 7 point, or black's 18 points, and trying to prevent white from coming down from the midpoint. So the first thought about this is why wouldn't it normally be still a double? Because classically, in order to double, you need to have some kind of a threat. So the idea of a threat is that next turn, the opponent will not be able to take the cube. And in this type of holding games, normally the opponent needs to be threatening to clear his midpoint. And here, he could clear his midpoint, of course, next turn. However, there is this other blot on the 14. So he doesn't quite clear all of the checkers from black sides of the board. So this would be like the most basic reason why this is not a double. But let's go a little bit deeper. Normally in holding games, in order to double, you need to have one of two situations. Either there is simply the opponent point there on the 7. Let's say copy this somewhere else. Yeah, let's copy this here, for example. Let's take an example where these blots are non-existent. Let's place them elsewhere. And let's place this checker here. So here we see a clear race lead. Let's increase it even a little. And we're going to see a simple double and take here if we analyze this with XG. And the reason is simply that the moment white comes away from the 13 point, there is no point to play on, so no cube can be taken. However, in trying to clear the midpoint, maybe a blot will be left. There is a 23 pip race advantage. So this would be a normal double and take, a normal holding game situation. Now, another situation that we find in the context of holding games, let's give white here the 5 point. And let's give him another situation where he's not immediately threatening to clear. Let's put a checker here. Normally, this would be a no double because there is no threat, you see. No double. It's close to a double, but not quite there. Why is it close to a double? Because normally these positions tend to develop into a double very soon. Obviously, it could be prevented. Maybe black is rolling double fives next turn, so suddenly the race will be even more or less. So there would never be a double, but this is really close to a double most of the time. We will see this being doubled soon. However, if we adjust the position just a little bit, and we put a blot here, that might already shift it, because the blot already begins to create a gammon threat, which we didn't have in the previous position. Here, apparently, the gammon threat is still not pronounced enough. Notice that the equities rose from the previous try. But let's put another checker here. And here we suddenly see a gammon threat, and there would be no reason not to double this. You see, here we see a double and a borderline take. Apparently, the gammon threat is strong enough to almost merit a pass. So now that we saw these kind of essential positions and we look at the two typical types of doubles and takes in holding games, here we see that we have a case in between. On one hand, yes, there is a gammon threat and there is a race lead. However, what is different here is that there is also a gammon threat from black side because of this blot on the 14 and because black has a beautiful position with a very nice activity. He's threatening to close a third board point. His front position is not necessarily inferior to white's. So this is why it would be slightly advised to hold on with doubling just this turn. But, it's not a big deal. We just took the opportunity to explain some basics of a holding game cube action. And let's go to the next position. And now that we are here at the next position, I realized that I actually didn't mean to talk about the last one at all, because I was going to the wrong double take. I was supposed to talk about the double take in game 2, not in game 1, but I believe it was still quite interesting to get this free extra lesson there on holding games for whoever still needs to learn this. And this is the double take decision of game 2, which was quite a dramatic blunder here by white, because obviously this double should never have been taken. And the reason is very simple. It's not just the fact that white is leading, but it's more the fact that white is a little bit stuck in black's board. And it's not only that black is threatening to make a meaningful point, either the 5 or the 7, that will further block the escape. It's also that white has a race deficit here. I suppose that if we gave a few extra tips, a few extra pips to white, then this would become takeable. Let's try this. Let's go to the other board. Not this. This. Let's paste the position, and let's decrease white's pip count by maybe 12 or something like that. Yeah, here I believe that we will see a take. And here, you see, this is a very clear double and take. Notice that the equities are very, very far from a full point. Here it would actually be a major blunder to pass the cube. Backgammon is not an easy game, and we all need to learn how to count pips. By the way, I have my own patented method of pip counting that is probably one of the fastest in the world. I'm not going to share anything about it, certainly in this video, but it exists. It's never been published anywhere, and chances are I'm not going to. But yeah, it's really important to learn how to effectively and quickly count pips in matches, especially in live matches when you don't see the pip count on the board. And this capability, also knowing when it's important to do it, can make a major difference. You see, we didn't make many changes here. We just gave white the opportunity to run 12 more pips ahead, and look how it completely changes the result of this cube decision. However, in the actual match, as white is also trailing in the race, there is really no reason to take the cube. Already, white will find it hard to escape here, especially if black makes an additional point. And then, if in addition to that, he also escapes into a losing race, then what's the point of playing on? Let's go to the next decision. Okay, this one is a really tricky position because it seems that you are invited to play like Michi here, simply enter from the bar because you have to, and quickly hit with the 4 so that so the black cannot create another board point quickly or make the bar point easily. However, from the viewpoint of game plans, white might be better advised to try to play a prime versus prime game. It's clear that he's vastly inferior in any case, especially because black already made a board point. And not only that blots are in the air, but you are also in a special score, 5 away, where doubled gammons count a lot because a doubled gammon simply gets you to Crawford. So the question is how not to get cubed quickly. And apparently, if you play the correct move, this wouldn't be still quite a cube. You need a little bit more than that. It's true that here as black, you have a couple of meaningful advantages. You have a better board. You have one extra board point in a position where it is also your turn and there are many blots running around. The problem is that in this turn, there is so much that you can do. Unless you roll really convincing doubles, for example, double 4s, even double 4s, I don't see really how they permit this. But yeah, no double really does that. Even double 5s don't. Even doubles don't help you. You either hit a checker on the opponent's side of the board, or you make a meaningful point. You cannot really do both. Double 4s can hit and make the bar point. That's not exactly the point we wanted to make. But yes, the thing is, you can only do one thing with your next turn, so it's quite premature to double here for black. On the contrary, actually getting hit here and hitting back from the bar, this might be a very quick double next turn. That might be difficult to take, simply because this blot can be hit with any 2 while closing the bar point. It can be hit with almost any ace except for 6-1. So there are many, many shots. And there is also another checker in the outfield on point number 10 of white. So yeah, the thing is that when you find yourself so clearly inferior in the position, your task is often to delay the cube. We see here that the cubeless equities are quite equal between the two plays, minus 416, minus 417. The reason that this play is slightly worse is mostly because it invites the cube earlier than the other play. Let's go to the next position. And here the play looks obvious. I mean, you have double 4s and there is this juicy blot standing on the 5 point. What could be more trivial than simply making the 5 point on the head of the poor opponent? Now, we see that before the roll, white's position is a little bit disorganized. If we look before the roll, yeah, many blots lying around, no board point made, a complete mess. And the question is, does the white structure get remedied just by means of these double 4s? No. He makes the 5 point. He makes the opponent on the bar. He puts the opponent on the bar. The position is still inferior. He doesn't have a priming structure. He still has the blots lying around, especially the one on the 2 point, inviting to be taken. On the other hand, white is still trapped behind the prime, and normally you don't want to play an attacking game when you are stuck behind the prime. However, this double force don't completely remedy the white situation, and there is another play that is slightly inferior but quite interesting. And this other play would have to do with hitting two checkers and closing an inner point of the board. You still leave a checker open, but this checker is going to stand on the ace point instead of the deuce point. You make an extra board point, but it's a little bit deeper. You put two checkers on the bar and you play a blitzing game. It's really difficult in real time to decide which of the two plays are superior. Also, such a decision is not super meaningful because the equities are really close. You simply get to play a different type of game. And maybe it is wrong in principle to try to play a blitzing game when you are stuck behind the prime, except that sometimes you don't really play a blitzing game. You're just trying to gain some time to either escape one of the checkers or maybe hit this black blot on the 14 or maybe anchor on the 20 or the 22. There are many other purposes that can be achieved by using a tactical blitzing play, not because you want to blitz, but because you need the extra time. The two plays are super close, different plans, different programs. I could speak about this a bit more, but let's go to the next position. So let's just create some connectivity between the positions. So white here makes the 5 point on black's head. Black enters and does hit a checker. And on the next move, we see here Michi entering and hitting inside his own board. And this must be the best play. This must be the best play because at this point, you really cannot afford to lose momentum. If you do anything but hit, black is looking to make his 5 point with many rolls. He could also make the 3 point on white's head. And if we see the equities here, we are already looking at a cube or at a very borderline cube, no cube situation. But when you need to enter from the bar, this does several things. First of all, because you are hitting a fourth checker, you might be helping white build a very necessary anchor inside your own board. Secondly, you lose time. Time is lost. Let's say that you don't hit, but you are still inviting white to anchor with a variety of rolls, either on the 22 or on the 20. This is the only way to stay in the game and delay the otherwise inevitable cube. And on the next turn, of course, we see an entering roll that doesn't hit anything, but it creates a very solid and stable anchor that even threatens to hit a checker on the 15. And this move simply asks white a question. It asks white, are you going to make a very meaningful play on your next turn? Are you going to have a very nice anchor or maybe hit a checker on the 11? Are you going to, with 2-6, 3-6, 4-6, are you going to make a very meaningful play next turn or are you going to get a cube that I'm not sure that you can take? And of course, we see immediately a very instructive moment in which there are two plays that are competing for attention. We see that there is one play that actually allows white to take the cube next turn, and a variety of plays that don't. Michi chose one of the plays that don't allow him to take the cube, probably believing that he couldn't take the cube anyway, so it doesn't matter what he plays. But apparently there was one play that allowed him to take the cube. And let's compare the two plays. This play here clears the blot from the 8 point and makes a third board point. This is a very interesting play. White recognizes it, that he didn't roll well. He cannot do anything meaningful on black side of the board, and he decides simply to tighten the defenses. He clears his main vulnerability on his own side of the board and creates a third board point as a deterrent to attack. He simply sits tight. Yes, there is a cube, of course. There is a major threat to make the 5 point, but many other plays that involve hitting loose or hitting more than one checker suddenly become double-edged. They could backfire. Temporarily, white has the stronger board with this play, and it just allows the cube to be taken. Obviously, there is a major gammon threat with three white checkers behind. However, there is also some level of a gammon threat on the other side, like we saw in the holding game, except that here the game is a lot more tense. We can see this reflecting also in the defensive winning chances, 31% compared to 29.5.6 with the other play. And this simply tips the scale from having to pass a cube to just being able to take it. Very, very interesting. The other play, on the other hand, played by Michi, creates some kind of a disconnect in the white position. The problem is that, okay, both plays, of course, clear the blot on the 10 point, but by playing 22-16, you are still offering some hits that are free of consequences to black. with those numbers that don't help him make the 5 point. So Black gets a beautiful diversification of his rolls. The rolls involving sixes, threes, and aces very comfortably make the 5 point. 5-3 hits beautifully on the 22, but suddenly the fours and the twos also hit on the 16. So basically, all of the numbers have something useful to do. Sixes, threes, and aces could make the 5 point. Sometimes the 5 can hit effectively inside the board. 5-1, 5-2, hitting two checkers. 5-3, double fives, making a point on White's head. And twos and fours hit conveniently in the outfield. Sometimes it's not that the position looks really bad, but then you ask yourself, what would you like Black to roll? And it's really difficult to find a bad roll for Black here, because every roll does something useful, and White doesn't have a very convincing position. So here it's simply double and pass. A correct double, a correct pass, and we see that taking this cube is already close to a blunder. It's not exactly a hopeless situation, but it's a very, very inconvenient one with a little bit too many gammons for comfort, especially at this gammon-sensitive score, but probably also without it. Simply too many gammons for the 29.5% winning chances to carry on their back. Also the gammon threat, even though you are winning also gammons, but it's a little bit too much anyway. Let's compare it to the other play. And here you both win more games and the gammon exposure is considerably lower. You clear the liability. You didn't venture into the outfield. So it's clear that the loose hits don't come without the cost, and the cost can be quite painful. White's board is stronger. We go to the next position. Okay, this specific cube decision is quite instructive. Let's remind ourselves again how the game reached this situation. We added an opening 4-1 for White, and then we had both players building their 4 point, quite important for both of them, of course. Then we had the Black player trying to come out with the 4 and bringing another checker to the zone. We saw White hit and get sent back immediately, getting a third checker sent back, and Black slotting the 11 point. We see here White rolling quite an inconvenient 1-6 from the bar. You do want to enter with the 1, but you don't have anything really useful to do with the 6 except for accelerating the Black offensive and hoping to catch back and Blot. There are many, many rolls in that either hit and make a point or hit and escape. 6-1, 6-4, 4-1, they hit and make a point. Rolls like 4-3, 6-3, even 3-1, I'm not sure that I would even like to hit. 3-1 probably I would like to hit. Yeah, making the 5 seems a little bit slow. But yeah, you see that many rolls are simply hit and clear a Blot or hit and make a point. So this definitely accelerates the Black attack. We see that the Black advantage grows after White enters with the 1-6 from 370 millipoint to 534. And here it's important for Black to realize that even though the position looks like a priming position with priming points, the play here is not about making the bar point or hitting a checker and escaping, but actually trying to push an attack and trying to push White with his back to the wall. White is really lucky here to not only enter both checkers, he was not a favorite to do that, but also making an anchor, even though it's an awkward anchor, but what can you ask for with two checkers on the bar when you're not rolling doubles and you didn't slot any of the advanced points? That's the best that can happen. And here, obviously, the double is quite obvious because it seems that White doesn't have much counterplay and you get an attack for free. And it's quite instructive to note that when you are evaluating such positions as the person being under the attack, then yes, the position looks very, very dangerous. But you need to notice a couple of things here when you consider your take-pass decision. First of all, the position does look scary. However, Black still doesn't have that many attackers in the zone. 5 checkers are still on the opposing side of the board. You are still attacking with only 10 checkers. And the second one, which is very meaningful, is that White also made progress on his own side of the board. The fact that you also hold an offensive point, a priming point, a 4 point, the point that is so valuable, this is what allows you to take the cube, because attacks can sometimes fail, they can sometimes backfire. And if you didn't have any meaningful progress on your side of the board, sometimes, even though you successfully repelled the attack, you still don't have that convincing of a claim for victory. While here, a big part of the White eventual prime or attack is already made. 8 checkers in the zone, 2 very good board points, the 4 point having been made. So this is why it's a double and a take. Let's try a couple of variations of this position. What happens if White doesn't have a 4 point? We see, of course, a very, very big pass, a 315 melee pass. Winning chances have dropped considerably, and now it's impossible to take the cube. Let's make another transformation here. Let's give black another checker in the zone, simply on the 11. More firepower. If you hit and you get hit back, let's say that you hit on the 5, you roll 6-4, something like that. You hit two checkers, maybe with the 6-4, but you get hit back. Can you hit back with the 6? That can become meaningful. And yeah, this attack is considerably stronger, still a take, but we see that it's harder to take. Quite interesting to study these positions, when you double, when you have to pass. Let's go to the next position. Next position, we see these double fours here, still in the same game when Hideaki leads the 3-2. And we saw this position, of course, in the previous video, and it wasn't immediately clear why this would be a blunder. You needed to clear the 18 points, so it doesn't seem to matter so much how you do it, except that it does. And the correct play doesn't really eliminate the potential of being hit in the outfield. So one asks himself, why was the other play a blunder? You see, double fours making the 10 point, or simply scattering the checkers around a little bit and bringing the checker from the 9 into safety on the 5. Doesn't seem to matter that much, but there is one key feature of this position. White would seem to benefit a lot and accelerate a lot black's crunching by effectively blocking sixes from the 24 point. So the correct play actually creates 3 places from which you can make the very important bar point. You can make it from the 10, the 9, or the 8, and if you can successfully make it, then black will be in a very, very hard position whenever he rolls a 6. Black is ahead in the race. Black would love to escape his back checkers, and you tend not to allow that with the correct play. Compare it to this play, and that can only make the bar point from 2 places, only for the 10 point and the 8 point. So probably the bar point is not going to be made, and any 6 would simply put black again in the game and slow down crunching and threaten to simply win by running the other checker. Now, the other position that I want to discuss in this game is exactly the opposite case, because here, actually, black seems to achieve what would be white's goal in the previous position, which is successfully making the bar point. Why wouldn't black not want to make the bar point? It looks so attractive. It effectively blocks 5s, it blocks the anchor. But the key to understand here that in the previous position, the guy leading in the race was black. So you absolutely had to stop him from coming out. And when you are behind in the race, you have an advantage in timing. When we look at the correct move, we see that white still has a number of checkers to play from, quite conveniently trying to make more points inside the board. Not to mention that he can escape with 5s, but it is actually black who is scrambling for timing. Not to mention that black already buried 2 checkers here on the 24 point. So the person who is being pressed for escaping is black and not white. And in this new position, it's exactly the opposite. Here, black already escaped, he's coming home. And what you want to do in this type of positions is not to make new points that you will later have to clear, but instead keep as many spares as you can for making the point that you need, which is the 3 point inside your own board. This is currently a gap, and it can make it quite hard to bear off later effectively without leaving blots. You need to fill in this point. You need builders of the 8, the 6, and the 5. When you make the bar point, suddenly there is no spares on the 8 or on the 7, and later any big number can simply expose a blotter. And of course, we saw that in this game, black was quite lucky to be able to bury in safely without leaving blots, but his task was quite inconvenient. We saw that 2 rolls later, the 6-2 forced black to lose the bar point anyway, but in worse circumstances than before. In the original position, black still has some checkers in the back that allow him some flexibility, but when he loses the bar point that he made, there is no flexibility left, and he's really exposed to leaving blots in the worst possible moment when white board is the strongest. So it was possible to avoid this situation altogether by not making this point and instead maintaining all of the flexibility with the correct move. Don't make a point that you will need to clear very soon. Maintain a sufficient number of spares in order to make the point that you do need. And we come to the last position that we're going to discuss in this video, which is the double sixes here by Hideaki, bringing 4 checkers down, creating some kind of a wall, creating some kind of an offensive with 12 checkers in the zone, apparently not quite accurate. And this is a recurring idea in these types of positions because your game plan should still be racing and running away. So what you would normally do, you would be bringing 3 checkers down instead of 4 and trying to run the last checker probably wouldn't be too far from a cube in a normal score if that last checker on the 18 manages to escape. When you're leading 5-2, you basically never cube so long as there is contact, because you might be winning a gammon, so why not? A gammon is only useful if it is undoubled. If you double, you typically get the cube back on 4, so only the opponent can benefit from a gammon. So you don't double this ever, but it will be very difficult to lose once this checker manages to escape, so you bring it closer. He does get hit with all of the sixes, with all of the ones, with double twos, with double threes, with 4-2. Okay, 24 shots, but 12 times, after 12 different white rolls, the rolls that are not sixes or ones or double twos or double threes or 4-2, you're free to roam, you're free to run on, and you are leading the race, you should simply come home. And that's all for today.
Hi, this is Backgammon Master Itzhak Solsky. I'm the sponsor for this program, and I'm a trainer with the Backgammon Learning Center. We watch videos in order to learn backgammon and improve our play. We like reading books and articles. We like posting questions in all kinds of backgammon forums and take advice from strong players. But if we are serious about improving our game, there is no substitute for a methodical approach, like having a personal coach take us systematically through all of the aspects of the game, teach us the reference positions, and see where we are stuck when we have a problem, where we think the wrong way, where we always tend to have the same kind of errors. A personal coach can notice our specific needs and failings and take us exactly through the road that we personally need to travel in order to reach the next level as soon as possible. Why spend years trying to collect all of the relevant information on our own, while a good coach can simply show us what we specifically need to learn at our own rhythm, at our own time, always recognize the next bit of information that will take us to the next level and save us a lot of time and effort in our backgammon journey. Join the Backgammon Learning Center today. You'll see the email address in the description. Drop me a note and let's schedule your first lesson.